Ancient Egypt, a civilization that in recent decades we look upon with particular admiration and reverence. But this civilization too has its dirty secrets, its grave delusions and misunderstandings of the world around it. We can safely say that its ignorance in some aspects would make the least intelligent person nowadays look like a genius to the ancient Egyptians. Don't you think that's possible? Well, believe it or not, the ancient Egyptians thought men menstruated. We'll really talk about that towards the end of the video. They didn't have a basic knowledge of hygiene and disease transmission, but you have to give them credit for some other problems. They find some pretty inventive, interesting solutions for what they had. What are we talking about? That's what you'll find in the next few minutes. Toilet facilities and hygiene. In ancient Egypt, the concept of sanitation and hygiene was quite different from modern standards, and this is evident from the use of the Nile River for both sewage and drinking purposes. Rich people in ancient Egypt, however, had bathrooms and toilets in their homes, a luxury unavailable to poorer populations. These baths had toilet seats made of limestone and a stone bathing slab on which a servant would pour water on the person bathing. However, there was no running water or elaborate sewage system. A vessel filled with sand was placed under the latrine to collect the waste. The wastewater from these facilities was usually piped off the premises and collected in a large container, which was later used to water the gardens. For less affluent people, the Nile River played a crucial role in daily hygiene. Many Egyptians who could not afford the luxury of indoor latrines resorted to outdoor relief, often in holes dug in the ground or directly into the Nile River. This practice was not limited to sanitation, but extended to other aspects of hygiene as well. The Nile was widely used for bathing and washing clothes. Although it was also used as a source of drinking water, the widespread use of the Nile for various purposes inevitably led to the pollution of its waters, which created conditions for the breeding of parasites and diseases. The lack of proper sanitation meant that the waste and garbage often ended up in pits, open fields or canals, further polluting the river and the fields where food was grown. Clothing in ancient Egypt, made mostly of linen, required frequent washing because of the easily noticeable dirt on the white fabric. The labor-intensive washing process involved hand beating, rinsing, twisting, and soaking the clothes. Although wealthy people had the means to hire others for the task and to use special facilities, the majority of the population relied on the Nile for laundry. Despite its pollution from waste and the dangers posed by hippos and crocodiles, the reliance on the Nile for both hygiene and laundry, combined with the general lack of sophisticated sanitation systems, contributed to the unsanitary conditions that were widespread in ancient Egyptian society. Ancient Egypt's approach to sanitation and hygiene resulted in a society in which standards of cleanliness differed significantly from modern expectations. The division between the wealthy, who had access to private latrines and baths, and the poor, who relied heavily on the Nile for their hygienic needs, highlights the social differences of the time. If you like what we do, support us by subscribing to the channel. Pregnancy test. In ancient Egypt, a unique method of pregnancy verification was used. This method, dating back to around 1350 BC, involved women urinating on barley and wheat seeds. The test was surprisingly effective, with modern research showing that it could correctly identify 70 to 85% of pregnancies. The principle of this test is simple but innovative. If barley and wheat seeds germinate quickly, it indicates pregnancy. The specifics of the test are quite interesting. It was believed that if the barley grew, the woman was expecting a boy, and the growth of wheat indicated a girl. If neither the two types of seed germinated, it was taken as a sign that the woman was not pregnant. This early form of pregnancy test reflects the ingenuity of ancient Egyptian society in solving basic life issues with the resources available. Although it seems like an elementary approach, the test had a scientific basis. Modern research, including a remarkable laboratory experiment conducted in 1963, confirms the effectiveness of this ancient method. The accuracy of this test is also remarkable, given the times and the lack of modern medical knowledge. We can consider this to be further evidence of the observational skills of the ancient Egyptians and their understanding of the natural world. The lice problem. In ancient Egypt, the spread of lice had a significant impact on personal grooming and culture practices, especially with regard to hair care. Documented as early as 1550 BC in the Ebers Papyrus, Egyptians were aware of lice and their nuisance. Various measures were taken to combat the transmission of lice, including meticulous personal hygiene rituals, especially among the priestly class. Egyptian priests, as the Greek historian Herodotus wrote in the 5th century BC, were required to shave all their hair, including eyebrows and eyelashes, every 3 days. This extreme measure was not only a matter of personal hygiene, but also a religious practice to ensure cleanliness when performing rituals. The fashion of hairstyles in ancient Egypt were not uniform throughout society. It varied according to social class, age, and gender. For example, enslaved people were not allowed to wear the same hairstyles as free people, and children usually had their head shaved except for one lock of hair. To maintain this clean-shaven look, Egyptians originally used methods such as tweezers, wax, or sugar. Razors were subsequently developed and became essential tools for maintaining beauty. Kings were even buried with gold or precious razors, emphasizing the importance of maintaining a hairless appearance even in the afterlife. Hair removal mixtures including ingredients such as crushed bird bones, oil, sycamore sap, and gum. In addition, wigs and artificial beards became popular, serving as a fashion of statement and protection from heat. Pharaohs wore special artificial beards of silver or gold to symbolize their status. The practice of dehairing to prevent the transmission of lice was not only a matter of practical, but was also intertwined with religious and cultural norms. If you find this video interesting in its description, you'll find a link to our video book of the dead, the Bible of Ancient Egypt, and why is the Bible silent about the Egyptian pyramids? Strange funeral practices. The burial of King Tutankhamun, one of ancient Egypt's most famous pharaohs, shows a unique and puzzling aspect. He is mummified with an upright male dignity position at a 90-degree angle. This unusual feature of King Tut's mummification has intrigued Egyptologists and historians for years, leading to various theories and explanations. Egyptologist Salima Ikram, a professor at the American University in Cairo, suggests that this particular aspect of King Tut's burial was a deliberate attempt to make him resemble Osiris, the god of afterlife. This was probably done to counter the religious revolution started by his father, King Akhenaten. Akhenaten introduced monotheism, worshipping Aten, or the solar disk, as the solar deity, and suppressed traditional Egyptian polytheistic religion. During his reign, Tutankhamun attempted to reverse his father's religious reforms and restore the worship of multiple gods. The erect penis in King Tut's mummification recalls the regenerative power of Osiris, signifying fertility and resurrection. This image is unique in the Valley of the Kings, where in other tombs, the king is usually embraced by Osiris or sacrificed to him. Two other unusual features of King Tut's burial support this interpretation. His body and sarcophagus were covered with an unusual thick layer of black oils and resins, probably to resemble the dark color associated with Osiris. Furthermore, unlike standard practice, King Tut was buried without a heart, and no scarab beetle was placed in its place to replace it, which could symbolize the death of Osiris, whose heart was allegedly cut out and buried by his brother Seth. This burial practice speaks volume about the complex religious and political situation in ancient Egypt at the time of King Tutankhamun. The presentation of Tutankhamun as Osiris at his burial was not only a religious symbol, but also a political statement intended to reinforce traditional Egyptian religious beliefs and oppose the monotheistic movement begun by Akhenaten. Necrophilia prevention. Speaking of a strange funerary practice, we can't help but pay attention to the practice of delaying the embalming of beautiful and powerful women in ancient Egypt. It was a unique and somewhat disturbing aspect of the funerary customs. According to Herodotus, a Greek historian who lived between 484 and 425 BC, the bodies of exceptional beautiful women were not embalmed immediately after their deaths. Instead, they were left for a few days before embalming to prevent acts of necrophilia on the part of the embalmers. Reportedly, this precaution was taken in response to an incident in which an embalmer was caught making sexual advances over the corpse of a recently deceased woman. Herodotus, in his detailed descriptions of Egyptian customs in his work Histories, notes that the wives of high-ranking men and women who were very beautiful or highly regarded were not immediately given to embalmers. They were usually given up for embalming on the third or fourth day after their death. This practice was intended to discourage the embalmers from abusing their bodies after the aforementioned incident. This gives us insight into the complex and sometimes troublesome life in ancient Egypt. It reflects not only the Egyptians' deep respect for the dead, but also the challenges they faced to preserve the dignity of the deceased in a culture that placed great importance on the treatment of the body after death. Obesity among royals. Contrary to the slender figures depicted in ancient Egyptian art, recent studies and analysis of mummies have revealed that many Egyptian pharaohs and high-ranking officials were actually obese and suffered from ailments related to poor diet and health. One of the most significant discoveries is from the mummy of Queen Hatshepsut, who ruled Egypt some 3,500 years ago. DNA analysis of her mummy shows that she was obese, suffered from diabetes, and had decayed teeth, conditions not usually associated with the diet she had access to. This discovery is not unique to Queen Hatshepsut. Many Egyptian mummies have shown similar disorders, including decayed teeth, which is a hallmark of carbohydrate consumption. The discrepancy between the idolized, beautiful, and healthy images in Egyptian art and the physical condition of the mummies suggests that obesity was more prevalent than previously thought among the ancient Egyptian elite. Moreover, statues and artistic depictions of high officials sometimes depict them with extra pounds. This depiction was likely a symbol of their success, access to abundant food, and lack of commitment to physical labor. It is possible, however, that they sought to be as close as possible to the actual images of their rulers. Notable examples include the statue of Khmunu from the time of Khufu, which accurately shows his double chin, heavy shoulders, and fat around his abdomen. Similar, the Old Kingdom tomb of Kar and Idu depicts one of these men both in his slender, youthful phase and as if an overweight middle-aged man. This artistic representation may have served as a marker of their noble status, whether or not it reflected their actual appearance. The mummies of upper-class people from the New Kingdom period further indicate that these people were well-fed and probably not very physically active. Many of these mummies contain evidence of their physical conditions such as arterial disease, often associated with being overweight and eating too much. This suggests that members of high-ranking priestly families and the royal family had access to large quantities of meat, sweets, and other rich foods that they consumed. Data extracted after analysis of mummies and some artistic depictions show that obesity and related health conditions were widespread among the Egyptian elite, which contrasts sharply with the idolized images depicted in Massey in the art and statues. This discrepancy highlights the difference between the social ideals and actual lifestyles of ancient Egyptian royalty and high-ranking officials. Ignorance about menstruation. The belief that men can menstruate is a misunderstanding that was widespread in ancient Egypt. This was largely due to the disease schistosomiasis, also known as bilharzia. Schistosomiasis is caused by the parasite Schistosoma hematobium and has been causing human suffering for at least 4,000 years, even after having its own specific hieroglyph in ancient Egypt designated as a dripping penis. Egyptian pharaohs as early as 1950 BC wrote of bladder disturbances that were probably caused by Schistosomiasis hematobium. Schistosome eggs have been found in mummies dating from around 1200 BC, confirming the long-standing presence of the disease in ancient Egyptian society. In areas where schistosomiasis was prevalent, especially in the tropics where people worked in wet places like rice paddies, adolescent boys often contracted the disease. The main symptom of schistosomiasis was hematuria, or blood in the urine, which was so common that people in Egypt expected adolescent boys to experience what was described as male menarche. To the uneducated, the presence of blood in the urine was seen as a natural, bodily process similar to female menstruation. Even in the 20th century, the appearance of hematuria was perceived by some people in Egypt as a normal bodily function. Lack of medical knowledge and understanding of schistosomiasis led to this misconception, and it was widely believed that it was a male form of menstruation. The disease is spread through the fresh waters containing schistosomes. The parasite Schistosoma hematobium causes lesions of the venous vessels of the genitourinary system, gastrointestinal tract, liver, lungs, and other internal organs, one symptom being blood in the urine. In the days before there was widespread treatment and notoriety that this was a disease, this symptom was so common that it became an expected part of male maturation in the affected areas. This misunderstanding shows how diseases can shape culture beliefs and practices, especially in the absence of scientific knowledge and medical advice. Deepen your adventure by watching our playlist. And if you want more, just play the next episode that comes up as a suggestion on your left.